Hello, and thanks for watching. I'm Susan Checkow-Lusignan, Director of Marketing and Program Development for the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library. FFRPL is the 501c3 charity that raises funds, presents programs, supports special projects, helps to create specialized spaces, and purchases supplemental materials and equipment for the Rochester Public Library. Learn more at ffrpl.org. We are delighted to present this installment of the virtual version of our Fall 2020 Book Sandwiched In series of book reviews. As many of you know, Book Sandwiched In has been running continuously since 1956. We'd like to thank all of our reviewers who are participating remotely this season, and we look forward to welcoming everyone back to the library when it is safe and healthy for staff, reviewers, and the public. Our fall BSI roster focuses on diversity and inclusion. Today's presentation will be a review of Troop 6000, the Girl Scout troop that began in a shelter and inspired the world, by Nikita Stewart. Troop 6000 is a remarkable account of Giselle Burgess, a young, hardworking mother of 5 trying to provide both necessities and opportunities for her family. When she became homeless, Giselle partnered with parents, advocates, and many remarkable girls to establish a Girl Scout troop in the New York City shelter system. Troop 6000 initially served about 20 scouts and has since expanded to include more than 600 girls and volunteers at over 18 shelters in New York City. Our reviewer today is Wendy Koberda, Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer for the Girl Scouts of New York Penn Pathways. Wendy leads the team that manages marketing, public relations, product sales, retail sales, data, and analytics for the 26 counties that make up the Girl Scouts of New York Penn. Wendy says, quote, "It's a great role for me because I work on big picture strategy for our council as well as on national movement committees. My focus is on telling the ever-evolving Girl Scout story. Our mission is to fuel female ambition." Wendy has consulted for Fortune 100 companies and built a national green market research firm from scratch. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Communications Broadcasting from SUNY Oswego.
Hi there, my name is Wendy Koberda. Thank you, Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library, for allowing me to participate in this segment of Books Sandwiched In. So today, I'm happy to share with you my impressions of the story about a unique Girl Scout troop told in Troop 6000, which is a book written by Nikita Stewart and published by Ballantine Books earlier this year. Now, I have to admit that I know a lot about Girl Scouts. I'm very familiar because I grew up in New Jersey in the suburbs of New York City, and I was a Girl Scout during grammar school, and I volunteered at summer day camp in my early teens. When my own daughter, Juliana, wanted to become a Girl Scout, I joined again. I wanted to volunteer as a chaperone. I wanted to go to camp with her, and I wanted to help out with cookie sales. Today, I'm fortunate to be working as a professional Girl Scout with a council that serves approximately 20,000 members in 24 counties in New York and 2 in Pennsylvania. We span approximately 26,000 square miles in our territory. I serve Girl Scouts of Nye Penn Pathways, and I'm the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer. Now, of course, I knew about Troop 6000, but I honestly didn't know the background story behind the formation of the troop. I didn't know anything about the people involved in the effort. The book itself was an easy read. It offered a glimpse into a world that I was not familiar with. Now, to begin, the book Troop 6000 was written by a woman named Nikita Stewart. Ms. Stewart is an award-winning journalist. She has spent her entire career covering social services, mental health, and the plight of poverty. She joined the New York Times in 2014 after working for the Washington Post. And as I started to delve deeper into the story, it became so obvious to me that this interest in the story of Troop 6000 was a passion project for the author. You see, she wrote her first article about a new troop, a new Girl Scout troop that was formed in the homeless shelter in Queens. The original article was published in the New York Times on Easter Sunday in 2017. And the inspiring piece was about a group of girls determined to find some sense of power and normalcy while being homeless. It went viral because it was thought-provoking, it was enlightening, and it was inspiring to so many who read it. Miss Stewart believed that there was much more to learn about this particular group, so she decided to embed herself with the troupe for more than a year in order to document and chronicle their growth. The book is divided into 26 chapters. There are lots of statistics that are woven into the narrative, and you learn a lot about the public assistance program. The story, though, itself is really revealed slowly in each chapter as the author recounts the personal challenges of the individuals who made this troupe a reality. The book challenges you to examine your own perceptions and prejudices of what it means to be homeless. It also helps to dispel myths around public housing and those who are thrown into the system while they're trying to work their way out of a cycle of poverty despite the odds. So to give you a little bit more insight, I think you need to know that Girl Scouts has always been an inclusive organization. And from the very beginning, the founding idea was that any interested girl should be allowed to join regardless of her means. And that is through our financial assistance programs. Girl Scout membership is currently $25 a year, and that fee is paid to our main organization, Girl Scouts of the USA. And it's used to cover things like insurance and programming and organizational structure, which allows them to manage the movement. Now, once you add in the cost of uniforms and badges and expenses for trips and camp, the annual investment can make the cost of the program a little prohibitive for some members. There are 111 local chapters of Girl Scouts all over the United States, and actually there are those overseas, and each one runs as an independent business. Local councils fundraise to pay for the programming locally and to provide assistance to anyone who needs it in their assigned territories. Now, unlike some organizations who are sponsored by businesses or religious organizations, Girl Scout troops are self-funding. Girls participate in 2 annual fundraising sales, the Fall program, which is chocolates, nuts, and magazines, and the very famous annual cookie program. These programs teach lessons in goal setting, decision making, money management, people skills, business ethics. And they allow troops to raise money to pay for supplies and trips and camping, and it also funds the structure and staffing for the local council. Most troops actually set aside some of their earnings to do local community projects because they want to give back. So what is it about Troop 6000 that makes it so special? Troop 6000 was formed within the Council of Greater New York, and unlike most other councils, its territory is entirely urban. About 70% of its members come from low-income families. Troop numbers are usually assigned by areas of geography, so troops in the New York boroughs are assigned numbers based on the geographic location. So if you're in the 1000s, you're from the Bronx. Brooklyn gets the 2000s, 3000s are reserved for the Manhattanites. Those who live in Queens get 4,000, and Staten Island residents get 5,000. 6,000 is a number that's used to represent troops that don't have a permanent residence. Homeless girls don't have a place permanently to call home. Miss Stewart makes the case for the existence of this unique troop when she shares the stories of all the women and men and girls who are able to make a difference in others' lives while struggling to get their own lives in order. And I think what really struck me most is this wasn't about handouts. This troop began really because one woman not only saw a need for herself and her daughters, but she decided to step up and volunteer. She wanted to make a difference in others' lives. And the impact was so obvious and so measurable. The troop was given funding through the efforts of their city councilmen and countless others who chose to donate money, time, and products to girls who would not have had the opportunity to participate in life-changing experiences like Girl Scouts. So our protagonist, Ms. Giselle Burgess, she's a young mother of 5 when we meet her. She was trying her best to provide for her family. She was working. As you read her story, you learn that she had some serious health issues. She had unfortunate relationship issues, and she's coping with the realities of raising her children as a single mom. She's the sole wage earner, and she gets to a point where she can't stay in the home that she'd secured for her family. It's a reality that she never thought she would be in. She had always been able to provide for her family. So she was really determined to own the situation, and she didn't want to cram more people into her mother's tiny apartment. Her mom had a 2-bedroom apartment, and so she decided that she and her children, they would enter into the world of temporary housing, into the shelter system. And what they had hoped would be very, very temporary turned into a year-long struggle. It took them quite some time to find permanent housing. So as you read her story and you hear the perspective shared by her daughters, you learn how this woman is determined to make things better for her family. She really never expected to be homeless. And as she recounted her story to Ms. Stewart, you come to learn what the term homeless actually means. So many people assume that the homeless are all criminals or drug addicts, people who live on the street. They live in cardboard boxes, they live in alleys, they live in bus stations. Many assume that they are not the cleanest, that they're mentally ill, that they're lazy, and really just beggars. While many do live wherever they can find, the vast majority of those who have fallen down on their luck are working poor. They're people who have been driven to homelessness due to job losses, unexpected healthcare bills, and other obligations which really consume their paychecks. They don't have any rainy day funds. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They try to get ahead as best as they can. Many try to live with relatives, but so many more can't rely on others who are also struggling to get by in low-income housing. So they get thrown into this system that's supposed to help them get back on their feet, but it's riddled with so many rules and regulations and red tape that those who are forced to use the services really can become quite lost and almost eaten alive by a system which, despite, I think, the very best of intentions, can fail so many of its recipients. So how did troop leader Giselle Burgess get involved in Girl Scouts? She wasn't a Girl Scout when she was a young child. In the book, we learn that there's a very powerful peer-to-peer word of mouth that can really become so essential when you want to build troops. It's Giselle's childhood friend Luana and her daughter Aaliyah who actively encouraged Giselle to allow her daughters to join the organization and to become part of the troop, which met in the basement of St. Sebastian, which was in Woodside, Queens. And that's where she meets the amazing Meredith Mascara. Meredith is a leader of a troop, another mother of 5. She lived in Sunnyside, New York. Meredith was a transplant of Vermont and an employee of Girl Scouts, and she befriended Giselle and really encouraged her not to just drop her daughter off, but to stay for the meetings. So Giselle, like many other parents, really was happy to have her daughter participate, daughters, I should say, but it took a little while for her to really completely buy into it all. Once she heard Meredith speaking to the girls about Juliette Gordon-Lowe, the founder of Girl Scouts, and she heard tales of her upbringing. She learned about her own health issues and how she had a very unhappy marriage. She watched how her girls were treated as equals in Girl Scouts, how important the steady friendship with other girls was for them. And when she was asked to become a chaperone for a trip to Camp Kaufman, which is 75 miles north of the city in Dutchess County, she reluctantly participated because her girls' dues were being subsidized by the troop. She felt a sense of obligation to give back. Although Giselle had vacationed and camped in the Catskills as a young child with her family, she really hadn't taken her own kids camping. This trip to Camp Kaufman gave Giselle a taste of camping in the Girl Scout way. She had songs, they had s'mores, which are those gooey chocolate marshmallow and graham cracker delights that you make over an open fire. She participated in rock climbing, she participated in archery. It gave her such a chance to see her girls focus on things other than being homeless. It also gave her the strength that she needed to make some very difficult decisions about her own life. So over a short period of time, Giselle and her 2 eldest daughters became much more involved in the movement. And Giselle became convinced that because she had stepped up, she really did one of the best things ever that she could for her family. Early on in the book, we learn that unfortunately, despite all of the good personal growth Miss Burgess went through, she was suffering from epilepsy since she was a child, and the stress that she was under really took a substantial toll on her health. She wound up missing way too much work to remain on staff at the dental office that she worked for in Manhattan, and she was given her notice. She received unemployment, but it wasn't really enough to sustain her family. And she winds up losing the home that she rented. So she's forced to really get into the PATH system to get her family some temporary housing. And while she's in temporary housing in Queens, she gets this idea to start a troop in the shelter because her daughters had grown so much in the troop that they had belonged to in Queens. So with the assistance of Meredith Mascara, her daughter's troop leader, and their city councilman, and other homeless residents of the sleep-in, Giselle winds up embarking on a year of challenges and personal growth. The book weaves in and out the perspectives of her eldest daughters and with other people who made this troop a reality. The personal stories, which highlight the fragility of the economic situations and stresses, really make you very aware of how easy it is, or it can be, to find yourself in a situation where you really are fighting harder than ever just to keep your head above water, much less swim out of a very strong riptide. Throughout the book, Ms. Stewart shares many of the reasons why so many who look to the system for help can find it so difficult to succeed. She shares anecdotes about those who are instrumental to the formation of the troop, and she peppers the story with statistics so readers really get a more comprehensive view of the problems that face countless others in this situation. She puts a face and she puts a name on people who are victims of poverty, often through no fault of their own. Now, I have to admit that before I read the book, I was very ignorant about the ways of social services and actually how the shelter system works. So to begin, there just aren't enough proper apartments or homes with appliances to accommodate people who are unable to finance a place of their own, and they need some bridge. They need temporary housing that's big enough to support their families. And so the city, in an attempt to follow the law in spirit, they wind up contracting with several hotels, not really apartments, but hotels, in order to provide temporary shelter. People wind up getting assigned to shelters through a system called the PATH. Now, of course, hotel rooms don't have stoves. They have tiny refrigerators. They have small bathrooms. The beds have scratchy cotton sheets with the Department of Health Services emblazoned on them. There's no storage room. So clothes and school books and supplies and toys, they can all be piled up against the walls as their occupants are trying to hold on to the very few necessities and comfort objects that they own while they're waiting to find more permanent housing. Imagine several family members sharing beds, living in rooms meant for short stays, and you can kind of see how they're forced to find ways to circumnavigate the system if they want to feed themselves or to survive. You really don't have much choice when you get into the system as to where you're going to be sent, what borough. You have no idea. And you don't know how long you're going to stay at the place you're going to be sent. So you could be placed in a shelter, which involves taking several means of public transportation just to get to your job. And your kids could be placed in schools that are closest to the shelter, but it could be very upsetting to their learning and socialization if they had friends and support elsewhere. Once you're in the system, there are explicit rules about being away from the shelter without permission. And if you leave your child unattended in your room for even a couple of minutes, you can get written up, right? In between visits, room visits, in between residents is completely prohibited. And it's interesting that these hotels also operate as regular hotels. So there are situations where they may decide to rent out the rooms that they have to higher paying guests. And then they kick out the shelter residents. So they wind up being in situations that are really untenable. It's constant chaos, constant turnover. So how do you even start a troop with all these restrictions? With Meredith's help, with the city councilman's backing, they had supporters in the health department as well. Giselle finds a way to provide sisterhood to girls that are really defeating the odds. They wind up meeting at the hotel's breakfast room once a week. And, you know, as I kept reading this book, I felt, gosh, the story here, it's not just a hard luck story about people of color. And it wasn't really about finding redemption in a program called Girl Scouts, which was traditionally thought of as a white person suburban activity. Really, the protagonists in this story really had to overcome their very own prejudices about what it meant to be a Girl Scout and how to actively work to change the rules to make the program work for them where they were, given all the limitations and the restrictions on the members. As each chapter details the challenges of starting this troop, the author was able to tell the personal stories of so many of the people who made the concept of Troop 6000 a reality for hundreds of girls and women in many shelters through their efforts. So, what did I like about the book? Well, as much as I feel that it's a good story, the author keeps it real. And what I mean by that is she shared insight into the feelings of Giselle, the feelings of wonder she had watching these girls grow and develop, but also doubt. The more media attention that was called to Troop 6000, the more participants found themselves living in a very strange reality. For example, they were invited to speak in fancy halls. They were on television. They were given gifts by celebrities and donations and offered all kinds of experiences by very well-meaning contributors. And yet, at the end of the day, at night, they went back to home in their temporary shelters. Giselle recounted in some moments she was so proud of the girls, and yet in others she felt if they had forgotten their manners. She knew she was contributing. She knew she was making a difference. Working with Girl Scouts, she wound up getting a promotion to grow this Troop 6000 to more shelters. Eventually, she was able to secure a home for her family, and yet, being happy, she was exhausted. And you can imagine this as you read through and imagine yourself in a similar situation. You wind up feeling this real sense of awe for a woman who kept going despite all of the challenges and obstacles. I think the best part is that the group that started Troop 6000 is finding ways to transition beyond the shelter, to keep these girls in the movement and to keep them involved when their circumstances change and they wind up moving to other areas and the next chapters of their lives. So is there anything that I didn't really like about the book? I think I can tell you that the story is incredibly powerful, and I really loved reading personal anecdotes, and I love the supportive facts. I will tell you that sometimes I found the back and forth between the different players and time jumps in the book to be a little confusing at times. I do think, though, that the author had a very difficult task because she needed to reach to the backstory for all the decisions that were made, and it really puts all the accomplishments of this determined group of people in the right context to understand why Troop 6000 was so different and such a breakthrough. I think what was most compelling was the feeling that despite all odds, a young mother, a person of color who had not had the best role models in her life, she really had no stability in terms of a partner to help her parent her children, she found a way to make things work. Through her sheer determination, we learn her first troop starts with about 8 girls, 2 of them are her very own, and over a few weeks it grows to 31 girls. And it only happened because she created a safe environment where the girls weren't judged by their circumstances, but by what they could do and by their ability to participate. She was able to convince parents to let their girls be part of something that was so much bigger than themselves. And shortly, about a year later, we wound up having 15 shelters. There were more than 600 members participating in the program, so it wound up being a very big success. The main themes of this book are, first, homelessness does not mean living on the street. 2, shame and stigma surrounding homelessness can make it very difficult for people to get help. Third is the bureaucracy really works against people trying to work their way out of poverty. Restrictions are really restrictive. Shelter living, it's chaos for families. Girl Scouts wound up being a stabilizing force in the tumultuous lives of the girls and the parents that participated. And finally, Girl Scouts is really a family-inclusive organization. It's all about creating a sense of community while we raise leaders. Troop 6000 is a book about courage. It's a book about character and confidence when the odds are completely against you. It's a tale of women and men working together to provide hope for the next generation, and it's about being part of a mission that's so much bigger than yourself. It's about teaching girls how to feel confident to use their voices, to learn how to work together, to keep yourself focused on your outcome, even when your situation appears to be dire. It's about networking, using your resources wisely, and using your connections to make things happen, rather than sitting back and letting things happen to you. The story was uplifting and it was inspiring, and I think it will help you understand the value and the relevancy of the Girl Scout movement today. I really enjoyed it, and I do hope you have a chance to read it too. Thank you.